This is not psychotherapy. Dr. Wills does not have a provider-patient relationship with this guest. These are just two people talking about emotions.
Welcome to Give a F*** Actually, with your host, Dr. Alex Wills.
Welcome to another episode of Give a F Actually. Today we are here with Dr. Maaahk Goulston. Welcome.
I'm so glad to be here, and I can hardly wait to find out what we talk about.
This is a bit of an experiment. The podcast is about going into unpleasant, negative emotions that we'd rather not have, and trying to see if radical emotional acceptance might offer us some better relationship with our own emotions. But before we get into all of that, let me introduce Dr. Maaahk. By the way, I'm very, very thankful because his podcast was the first that I was invited on about the book, and it's the My Wake Up Call podcast. So now things have continued to go on, and he's returning the favor to be on mine. So this is a really excellent time. Dr. Maaahk Goulston is a business psychiatrist, former FBI hostage negotiation trainer, and Marshall Goldsmith MG100 SWAT executive coach. He is the author or co-author of 9 books translated into 42 languages, including my favorite book, Just Listen, which became the top book on listening in the world. He hosts the My Wake Up Call podcast, is a co-founder of the 90-Second Mentor on LinkedIn, is a founding member of the Newsweek Executive Forum, is the inventor of surgical empathy, which he used to prevent suicide in all his patients, and is executive producer of teen mental health documentary, What I Wish My Parents Knew. Welcome to the show, and how's everything going for you today?
It's going great, and right out of the gate, I live to make good people like you more impactful. So if you're listening in or you're viewing this, I'm hoping to help Alex resolve dissonance that he's causing. So dissonance is when you hear, see, or feel something, it's different than what you feel. And so this is the Give an F podcast. Alex is a deeply caring psychiatrist. He cares about you going into the darkest parts of your life to help you be stronger, more resilient, happier. But the title, which is a killer title, doesn't sound like Alex, because it's so he and I, it's a work in progress, are working on how, when he's talking about the Give an F book or the Give an F podcast, that out of the gate, we'll work on this, Alex, but I look forward to helping you, because I think what you're doing is so important and is so counterintuitive. And even though you're interviewing me, I'd like you to share with the viewers and listeners how it is that leaning into unpleasant experiences that most people would want to avoid, how does that help?
Exactly, and that is the beauty of it. It's very paradoxical. You would think you can't be a nice guy and give a fuck at the same time. And what happens when you do get into the dark side and you start to explore with curiosity those darker emotions, the anger, the hate, the disgust, and validate the reality of those emotions that you experience? How can that make your life better? How can you become more of a whole person by integrating those parts? I'm curious with you, Maaahk, in your experience of doing your own work. As a psychiatrist, we're encouraged to do our own therapy and our own exploration from training. Any memories of sort of some big steps forward that you were able to grow into along your pathway?
Well, there's an anecdote that I share, and I may have shared it with you when you were on my podcast. So I trained in psychiatry. At the end of my training, I was about to go into a fellowship, and the fellowship fell through. So I figured, I'll open up an office, see if anybody shows up. And I had a mentor named Dr. Edwin Schneidman. He was a psychologist at UCLA, and he was one of the top pioneers in suicide prevention. He was to suicide prevention what people like Marshall Goldsmith is to executive coaching, what another mentor of mine, Warren Bennis, was to leadership, what another mentor of mine, Larry King, was to doing talk interviews. And what would happen is he would do a consult to people who were still very suicidal, but they needed to be discharged because you just can't keep them there forever. So we'd go do a consultation, and in order for these patients to be discharged, there needed to be someone on the outside who would accept them. So he would call me, page me, and it was always the same call. Maaahk, this is Ed. I'm with this handsome young man. I'm with this lovely young woman. They're in a lot of pain, Maaahk. You could help them, see them. And then he'd put them on the telephone and we'd talk a little bit, and then they'd be discharged and I'd see them. And one of them was very suicidal in that she'd made 3 or 4 attempts over the previous several years. She'd been in the hospital 2 to 3 months every year. Back then, you could be in the hospital for a month or two. It was much different than it is now. And I'll call her Nancy, and I didn't think I was helping her at all. And what would happen is she would come in 2-3 times a week. She wouldn't make eye contact with me. So if you're me, Alex, this would be Nancy. She wasn't exactly catatonic. So back then I used to moonlight, and your viewers and listeners may not know what that is, but moonlighting means you cover for doctors at another hospital. And I would moonlight once a month at Metropolitan State Hospital outside of Los Angeles. And sometimes you're up 24 hours, you're sharing shifts with someone else, but you could be overtired. So there's a Monday, I come in and there's Nancy, and she's like that. And I haven't slept for a long time. And when you don't sleep, and Alex is aware of this, you can get into a sort of a dissociated state. Your sphincters are kind of weird, your mouth is dry, and your mind can be a little bit wigged out. So I'm there, and she's not looking at me. And as I look at her, all the color in the room turned to black and white. So I'm looking at her, and there's no color. And I thought I was having a stroke or a seizure, so I did a neurologic exam on myself. I'm holding my finger up like this, seeing if I'm seeing double. I'm tapping my elbows. And then I realized I'm not having a stroke or a seizure. And I just kept getting colder and colder. Then I had this crazy idea that I was feeling what she was feeling. So I was physically feeling it. I mean, the world was black and white and cold. And I leaned into it. Something about it caused me to lean into it. And it got worse and worse and worse. And because I was sleep deprived, I said this to her. I said, Nancy, I didn't know it was so bad, and I can't help you kill yourself. But if you do, I will still think well of you. I'll miss you. And maybe I'll understand why you had to do it to get out of the pain. And I thought to myself, did I think that or did I say that? And I realized I just gave her permission to kill herself. And I said to myself, don't write that in the record. And she looked at me for the first time. So when I said that, she's something's getting sparked in her, and she's fidgeting, and then she holds on to my eyes like I'm holding on to yours. And I said, "What are you thinking?" Because I thought she was going to say, "Thank you for understanding. I'm overdue." And instead, she looked into my eyes and she said, "If you can really understand why I might have to kill myself to get out of the pain, maybe I won't need to." And then she smiled. And then the color came back and the coldness went away. And I was holding on to her eyes for the first time. And I said, "Here's what we're going to do. I'm not going to persuade or convince you or throw treatments at you that have been tried before unless you ask for them. Would that be okay?" And she's still looking in my eyes, and she nods. And then I leaned in deeper, Alex, and I said, "What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to find you wherever you are, and I'm going to keep you company there as long as it takes, because I don't want you to be alone there anymore. Would that be okay?" And she started to cry. So what that did is it caused me to realize that we need to go inside where people are at. And I'll tell you something, in the last 4 years, I have made a pledge to myself and a promise that I will not try to persuade or convince another human being to do anything. What I will do is I'll share observations, or I'll share what I'm passionate about that might help them and see if it lands for them. But I'm not going to persuade anyone to do anything. And what happens, here's what I've discovered. And in my book, Just Listen, one of the things I talk about is we can talk over, at, to, or with people. And when you talk over people, you're insulting them. When you talk at them, you're being confrontational. When you talk to them, it's business as usual. And when you talk with them, you're creating a space that they can join you in. Over and at pushes people away. Trying to be persuasive or convincing takes away the other person's freedom to choose to engage with you, because they have to engage with you because you're being so darn convincing and persuasive. But when you talk to people, that's business as usual. But when you talk with people, it's as if you're going up to them, putting your arm around their shoulder and saying, "It's going to work out. You're going to walk out of here. You're going to walk out of wishing you were dead. And I don't know how we're going to get you there. And you may think I'm crazy, but we're going to get you to where you're glad to be alive." And they would look at me like I'm crazy. But do you follow what it's like the difference between AM radio and FM radio. So I communicate totally on FM, whereas AM is news, dot, 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 dot. And so here's what I'm trying to teach the world. Is it okay that I'm going on and on like this, Alex?
I love it. What strikes me about the story about this young woman is you didn't offer some magical medication or some cure, or you didn't give her prescriptive advice. The miracle was you were the first person to connect, to give her this sense of empathy. And the fact that she felt understood in itself created a huge shift in her, if I'm understanding.
Yeah. In fact, I've given it a name called surgical empathy. When people are deeply traumatized from life, they form psychological adhesions to their coping mechanism. And an adhesion is much stronger than an attachment. When people form an attachment, you might be able to give them insight. You might be able to do something to shift them. But when people form adhesions, it's kind of like after surgery when organs adhere together, you have to go in there and sever them. Surgical empathy is pinpoint empathy, in which what I did with Nancy is I enabled her to let go of death and grab onto feeling felt. Not just understood, but she felt. And when she felt, she was able to grab onto that, and the beginning of relief and a little bit of hope she felt caused her to cry. And so surgical empathy goes in there and helps people to feel felt. If you're listening in and you're a parent and you're worried about a teenager, so one of my passions is suicide prevention and teen mental health. I'm going to give you 4 prompts, which is sort of an example of surgical empathy if you're worried about one of your teenagers. And most parents are. This pandemic's been hard on all of us. And this is the script, so you may want to play this over again. If you're worried about one of your teenagers, you do this when you're doing an activity together. Don't do a heart-to-heart talk with them that they don't initiate it. Teenagers can't stand heart-to-heart talks. It is nails on a chalkboard unless they initiate it, which they rarely do. And so what you do while you're driving or doing an errand or an activity, you say something like this. Hey, honey, a lot of us parents are worried about our kids. The pandemic, the school closures, shootings, all this stuff. And I'm worried about you. Can I just run some things by you that might help me feel better? Okay, Ma. Okay, Dad. Here's the first prompt. And you're doing this again, while you're driving. You don't want to invade their space. And the first prompt is, at its absolute worst, how awful are you capable of feeling about your life or yourself? They're going to go, what? And you're inviting them. You're not interrogating them. Yeah, at your absolute worst, how awful are you capable of feeling about your life or yourself? Pretty awful. Surgical empathy. Pretty awful or very awful? Okay, very awful. And then you have them talk about it. Well, tell me about it. How long have you felt that? How bad does it get? And then the second prompt is, and when you're feeling that way or you felt that way, how alone did you feel? Pretty alone, or sometimes all alone. Okay, all alone, and you get them to talk about that. The third prompt is, take me to the last time you felt it. Was it 2:30 in the morning when we heard you walking around in your room and sounded like you couldn't get to sleep? And an interesting thing happens is when you can get another person to describe something so clearly that you can see it with your own eyes, they re-feel it, but they're not alone. Yeah, I couldn't get to bed. I was walking around my room. Yeah, we heard that. What was going on? Well, I couldn't get to sleep. Yeah, we heard that. What'd you do? Well, I tried to get to sleep and I couldn't. And then I started walking around and I felt like kicking the wall or punching my pillow. And oh, that sounds awful. What'd you do next? Well, I started looking for cough medicine or something to knock me out, and I just couldn't find any, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And so what happened next? Well, the sun rose. I felt a little better. The fourth prompt is, if you're fortunate, you will have earned the right to eye contact. And you say, look at me. And then you say, I have a favor to ask you. Maybe more than a favor, but we'll call it a favor. Next time you're feeling that, or even going in that direction, I want you to do whatever it takes to get your dad or my undivided attention. Because we have a million things going on that we're juggling. We're all over the place. But there's nothing more important to your dad or your mom or me than helping you to feel less alone when you feel that awful. So would you do that? Oh, and by the way, you're not a burden. In fact, if you can open up to us and say, Mom, Dad, it's happening again, and we'll talk, not only are you not a burden, you're a gift. And you're a gift because you're opening up to us as opposed to blowing us off or saying, I'm fine, get off my back. And you may not understand that you're not a burden. But down the road, you're going to have kids. And if one of your kids opens up to you the way I'm asking you to open up to me, you'll see that it's a gift to you. So could you follow that, Alex?
Yeah, that's so powerful. When I'm with patients, I'll often try to put myself into their shoes and try to imagine or emotionally feel what I imagine they might be feeling. And, putting yourself in the shoes of the distraught teenager and imagining a parent saying that and connecting is very, very powerful. It gave me chills.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it did. Something I wanted to share with your listeners and viewers. I wrote Just Listen, came out 2009, and it just keeps making bestseller lists. It was recently on another bestseller list as the number 4 book of best communication skills books of all time out of 15. But, it's a list that nobody heard of. But it was nice to be on that list, to be number 4 out of 15. And one of the things that I'm trying to teach people, and I'm going to demonstrate it to you right now. I spoke in Moscow before the pandemic, and I headlined with a fellow named Daniel Kahneman. He is a Nobel Prize winner. He wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And I headlined because my books have done reasonably well in Russia. And one of the things I tried to teach to the audience, which I try to teach everywhere, is that whoever you're with, they're always listening for something underneath their listening to you. And if you can know that they're listening for something and just be curious about it. So if a conversation's going sideways, if instead of escalating, you can say to the person, can we stop for a moment? As opposed to letting it go sideways. And they'll go, what? And you say, when we started talking, you were listening for something and you didn't hear it. In fact, we've gotten further away from it, which may explain why you're getting a little bit agitated. What were you listening for when we started talking? And I'll demonstrate it for you and see if I can re-evoke those chills in you. So there's a part of you that's being very professional. You're new to this podcasting. You're doing a very professional job. Thank you very much. And you're asking good questions and you're listening to me. And then you're reflecting back, in a very professional way. But this is what I think you're listening for underneath what you're listening to. And try this on. So if I'm you, Alex, what I'd be listening for is guests that can give my listeners and viewers incredible value. Because I don't want to waste my listeners or viewers' time. I want to give them guests who they can learn something from, try something out, and that their life can be immediately better. Because as I build this podcast, people are going to trust me and have confidence that I bring things to them that are worth their time. So I think you're listening for something that you can say, oh, this is going to be worth my listeners and viewers' time. Oh, they're going to like this. And as you do more of these, I will tell you, because I've done 480 episodes of my podcast, You're also listening for someone who might be a best-selling author and you tried to screen them, but they are awful. They're arrogant. They may have a best-selling book and you're thinking, this person is a jerk. And you're being polite, but then you have to go back to them and say, we couldn't use the interview. Maybe we can do it over again. But you're also listening for people that you have to protect your listeners and viewers from, because they can be insulting to your viewers and listeners. They can waste their time. And I can tell you, as you go down this road, you don't want to waste people's time. So is any of that true? Did I track with your inner Alex at all?
Yeah, it's like I don't understand how you can see inside my head and all. The one caveat is with you, it's very easy to listen to and for, because everything that you have to say has such value, and you've been at this for a while. You've helped so many people, and you also have connected, and you've seen the results of how these lessons that you have really impact the lives, for sure. And I'm really curious about you. The podcast is a bit of experimental, as we said at the beginning. And I was wondering if you might have any emotions that you've been dealing with or experiencing lately, maybe having to do with feeling down sometimes, anything that you wouldn't mind sharing, just to kind of maybe give us a little brief background of why the situation is going on, but more importantly, what those emotions are and what the intensity is, so that we can maybe get a side of you that other people haven't seen as much.
Well, thank you. I'll give you a recent story. I'm going to be co-hosting a radio show for UK Health Radio. You can go to ukhealthradio.com, and it'll be starting soon. And their audience, and they are the leading talk health radio channel in the world. And their listeners are 70% working women, mostly in Britain, between the ages of 25 and 45. So these are very busy women. And they're looking for something to improve their health, mental, physical, whatnot. And I got into kind of a conundrum, because I have a publisher called HarperCollins, and they said, oh, let's do a book on that. And I write books about leadership, marketing, business, part of the HarperCollins leadership division. And I realized what I'm going to be speaking about with these working women, it's not about business. They're just trying to survive. And I got into a conundrum in my head, and then I had this realization. I don't really care about business. And the part of me, so here was the conundrum, the part of me that was chasing after, be successful in business and all that, that was my ego. And since I've done reasonably well, it's intoxicating to play to your ego. Oh, it's you're getting these dopamine hits, these adrenaline rushes. Oh, it's wonderful. The momentum is exhilarating, but it's all driven by ego. And the best part of me is not chasing after fame and power. It's caring about the little people. It's caring about their pain. It's doing what I did with my suicidal patients. So I got into this conundrum because, HarperCollins leadership doesn't necessarily want to help working women. And then I decided, I don't care about the HarperCollins book. I want to help these women. And so the title of the show, we went through a bunch of titles, was going to be Goodbye Ego, Hello World. Great title. But then we were talking.
Yeah.
It's a great title. That's a good book. Maybe I'll write that book. Or if you're listening in, you can steal the book. It's a great title. Goodbye Ego, Hello World. And that was my conflict. And then I was thinking, well, then I have another book called Get Out of Your Own Way. And then I put myself in the feelings of working women. And I couldn't come up with a title about what it is they want and need. Then I saw this recent movie called The Banshees of Inisherin. I can't pronounce it. Nominated for all these awards.
That's a great movie.
It's a great movie. And if you've seen it, you'll know what I'm about to say. It has two friends who've been friends forever, and then their friendship breaks up. And one person says to the other, I don't want anything to do with you because you're kind of boring. And the other person is, kind of not a simpleton, but he is boring. Doesn't talk about anything interesting. And the whole movie is about that person saying, don't have anything to do with me. I don't want to have anything to do with you. And then the other person feels desperate. And after I watched that, I said, if I were to ask those characters, if I were to ask those working women, so would you like to find a way to get out of your own way? They'd say, nah, I'm not that interested in it. Would you be interested in Goodbye Ego, Hello World? That's cute, Mark. It's a good book. Not interested. And then what happened is when I drilled in to what drove those characters and go drive those characters, and when I drilled into those working women, what I realized they all want to do is hurt less. And what drives people to desperation is they can't stop the hurt. When Nancy couldn't stop the hurt, death looked like it was going to relieve her. So the title of our show for UK Health Radio is going to be Hurt Less with JJ, my co-host, and Dr. Mark. And, we don't know if it'll catch on, but if you saw that movie, doesn't that make sense, Alex? The Down Deep, one of the characters feeling bored, it was hurting him. It was driving him crazy. And then the other friend being abandoned. Well, how can you abandon our friendship? It hurt him. But of course, and here's something I'd like to change with our show. There is a universal phobia in the world of, and this goes to give a fuck. There's a universal phobia about feeling hurt, feeling it nakedly, feeling it raw, not racing to the impulse to get away from it by eating, drinking, getting angry. And the world is, and so we'll see if we can grow it, because most people, when you say, it sounds like you'd like to hurt less. And they might say, what? And so part of the way the marketing for the show is, as you look out in the world, underneath all the anger, the frustration, the screaming, the depression, underneath it all, do you think people are living in a world of hurt? Hopefully people will say, I think you're right. And then the second part of it is, when you have felt angry, frustrated, doing compulsive behaviors, underneath it all, are you feeling a world of hurt? Well, if so, we hope you'll tune in, and together we're going to see if we can help the world hurt less. I like it. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I want to dive into that a little bit more to kind of figure out what your emotional journey was with the conundrum. By the way, I forgot to mention at the beginning, but today that we're filming this, the 17th of January, Tuesday, is the actual release date of the book, Give a F actually. So it's quite an honor to have Dr. Maaahk on today of all days to help launch this thing off. But diving back into the conundrum, I'm curious, could you list out the painful, hurtful, or unpleasant emotions that you had when you were in the middle of this tension, not knowing exactly what to do?
Well, the painful emotion I had, and again, this is just me, and I'm kind of quirky, was shame. I liked the adrenaline rush. I liked the dopamine of rubbing shoulders in the business world and yada, 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 and being masters of the universe, and aren't we terrific? But I felt shame because it took me away from connecting to people, my ego. I'll share something which I hoping I've corrected. My kids are all grown. I have 4 grandchildren, 4 and under. And when my kids were young, I loved them. We do things together, but I wasn't that present. In fact, their nickname for me, which we can laugh at, but it's not funny, was hi kids, bye kids, love you kids. Because I was always in the rush to something. Oh, I got to go rush out and earn a living so I can support them. But I wasn't present. And I'm trying to correct that because I am blessed with my wife. I hit the lottery that she puts up with me still. But I get to see my 4 grandchildren almost every day. One of the benefits of living in Los Angeles is, as crazy as it is, when your kids go away to school and college, a lot of them come back to Los Angeles. Whereas if we lived somewhere, in the middle of nowhere, I'm not trying to hurt people's feelings. They say, hey, I live in nowhere. Don't say that. But you know what I mean. But there's a good chance that if your kids go somewhere else, they may not come back. So I am blessed. My wife and I are blessed. So I get to see my grandchildren every day. And I'll share something with you. I wasn't close to my grandparents because we lived geographically at a distance. So, and what happens is when I'm with my grandchildren and my children, I do not say a word and nobody talks to me because they're very busy talking about the details of everyday life, and I'm not up on those, and my wife's up on all of those. And if I was going to be self-absorbed and they're not talking to me or including me, I would leave and go check my email. But I realized that just being there and not resenting that I'm not being included, but taking delight in the scene is the presence I'm trying to bring. So when I ever see my grandchildren and they're doing something, if they make eye contact with me, I am immersing them with a look that says, you have no idea how much I adore you. I don't say the words necessarily, but I will tell you, when you can put aside your ego, when you can put aside your agenda, when you can be totally present, taking delight in a person you love, they will take a double take from that. Because what's that about? And sometimes it's so, it's you're immersing them in so much love that, I'm guessing they'll say, what's the matter, Grandpa? Or they call me Maaahk. Say goodbye to Grandpa. Goodbye, Maaahk. And, and when we have this conversation and they ask me, because it grabs their attention, I'll say, I'm just realizing how lucky I am that you're in my life. And so I'm sharing that with you.
That's very beautiful.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when my family's around and sometimes they're checking their text messages and they're busy, with busy lives, I can tell you that if I check my message while I'm with them, even though no one's talking to me, they all give me the stink eye. Oh, he's too busy. There he is, stuck with, workaholic dad. Geez, can't you, you're a grandpa. Can't you let it go already? You're retired. What's so important about that email? And I can tell you that not only do they give me the stink eye, but if I'm even thinking about doing it in my mind, they can pick up the change in energy.
Right.
Whereas if I can seat myself there and say, Maaahk, don't feel sorry for yourself. You are blessed. You're blessed. You have so much to be grateful for. They're going to grow up real fast. Just take delight in them. So I'm just sharing that. I don't know.
What's really fascinating. Yeah. What's fascinating about that to me is with the book, Radical Emotional Acceptance, with the Give a F Actually stuff, we talk about how these negative emotions or these painful emotions that most people want to get rid of, not experience, not have be part of their lives, are actually good. And in these examples, both with the conundrum about the name for the show that you're going to be doing and with your relationship with your kids and grandkids, I love how you mentioned the emotion of shame. I think of shame as this fireball emotion. It's very powerful. It's very painful. It gets our attention. It slaps us in the face. It hurts. And a big mistake I think a lot of folks make is when we have the emotion of shame or when we experience that emotion, we think it means something about us or who we are deep down, rather than just telling us about our situation, our relationship to the world, our relationship to our family. It's trying to make us pay attention to how we fit into our micro tribe or in the modern world, our global tribe. And what you talked about seems to demonstrate that you were very much in touch with having that painful emotion of shame, but you didn't use it as a way to turn against yourself, but it made you pay attention in order to make the best decision about how to value the relationships that you're in.
Yeah, I'll give you a wonderful definition of shame that I learned from a friend of mine, a Rabbi Nachum Braverman. And it's exactly what you said. And so my definition of shame is I am either doing something or failing to do something that is out of alignment with who I believe myself to be. And who I believe myself to be is someone who cares more about others than servicing my ego. As exciting as servicing my ego is, and so for me, you're right, the shame was a great signal. You're out of alignment with who you want to be. Now that said, I cut myself slack. So after I've been there, taking delight with my family, being present, being the person I want to be, and it's exhausting chasing after toddlers when, they get packed up and they leave. And then if I've run some errands that I need to for my wife, when it's my time, you better know that I just hightail it off to something that feeds my ego.
Nice. Yeah. And I like the honesty as well, not denying. So there's two parts. We have the emotions that are painful, such as shame, sadness, fear. And we have another, at least I think of them as a different category of emotion, which is desires. We have wishes, desires, preferences. We have things that we want. And we also have an ego. So being honest about all of those things instead of trying to wrestle with it or defeat these emotions, pick and choose, just being, I guess, more enlightened to accept all of these emotions and then make the most educated, emotionally wise decision about how to move forward. And in a way, I almost feel like I'm writing about your life kind of from an outside perspective, because you talk about this and you live out these principles already. You've already been around the block. And so I'm kind of just catching up with you. And we use different stories or different language to really communicate these sacred truths that are more, timeless.
Yeah, I want to give you a sacred truth. My LinkedIn profile is a moving target because every now and then I change it to something that's more empathic, and the business world ghosts me. LinkedIn's business, I had one profile that was leading healthy conflict coach. Then I had another one, free your mind coach. I got ghosted. So now if you go to LinkedIn, it says SWOT coach, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. The business world knows that. Okay, so that's fine. So I was being empathic to the business world as opposed to my own ego. Oh, I'm this empathic person that the business world doesn't care about. But when I was talking about being leading healthy conflict coach, and I think you'll get this. One of the things that I coach people about is that conflict is great. So most people see conflict as bad. But the point is, if conflict is so universal, not just with other people and not just watching other people be in conflict, but conflict with yourself. Why did I do that? And if it's so universal, if we could flip a switch and see it as good, because most people think of conflict as bad, that could be cool every time you're in conflict. And I actually have an article I write for Newsweek Expert Forum. And I think if you look up Newsweek Goulston conflict, you'll see an article on this healthy conflict. And what I coach people about is I say, I'll tell you how to turn conflict into something good. And every time you're in conflict, if you say to yourself, opportunity for poise, empathy, and growth. If you say that, and the Newsweek article starts out with, forget you, Mark. It's actually another F word, but they couldn't use it. And I said, ooh, that's good. Play it louder. Forget you, Mark. And then I talk about how I just coached someone and said, every time you run into conflict, say to yourself, opportunity for poise, empathy, and growth. And the person I was coaching said, I don't want to say that. I don't want to have poise. I don't want to have empathy. I don't want to forget you, Mark. But this is how it works. So the next time you're in conflict, and some of your listeners or viewers are saying, I like what those people said. Forget you, Mark. But if you're in a conflict, here's the opportunity for poise. Apply this word, radical patience, which means radical patience is just pausing. Just pausing. And when you can show poise and pausing when everybody else is going crazy, people are going to be drawn to you because nobody shows it. And then opportunity for empathy. You pause and say, wow, what just upset me? Why am I so upset about this? Geez, I'm angry. Whoa, geez, I'm ticked off. What's going on with you, Mark? And so you drill in and be empathic to yourself. That can calm you down. And then you say, I wonder what's really going on with them. I wonder underneath they're saying that to me, something else is going on with them. Geez, I wonder what's going on. And then they may be in the middle of a conflict with you, and here's the opportunity for growth. So you pause and you pivot, and you say, wait a minute. And they're going to say, what? No, you can say, wait a minute, just give me a, what? I was just figuring out what I'm so upset about, what I'm so angry about, what I'm so ticked off about. No, wait a minute. Yeah, I finished figuring that out. And now I think I've figured out what you're upset about. Now I think I've figured out what you're angry about.
Right.
And I think I've figured out what you're disappointed and hurt about. Can I run those by you? But can you see that sequence, poise, empathy, growth? That's a whole.
It very much parallels. Yeah, it's wonderful, and it really parallels the principle of dropping the shield of anger, frustration, getting in touch with those more vulnerable emotions such as hurt, disappointment, fear, and then learning from them with wisdom. What I like is that you added to it not only practicing that radical emotional acceptance or that radical patience with yourself, but after you get clear with your own vulnerable emotions, whether it's shame, disappointment, sadness, you also take that extra step of becoming aware of the other person's vulnerable emotions and trying with the best of your empathetic mind and heart to imagine what vulnerable, painful emotions they're having. Finally, then we get to what we call step 4, which is to then act. After all of this patience, then you decide to act or not act on the emotion. Then you have an emotionally wise, informed decision about what to do next. And like you said, oftentimes it's, let me find out more. Let me ask a question. I think that you might be feeling hurt and sad about this, but I want to make sure that we're on the same page so that I can really understand what your, state is. So I see how much value that has. Radical patience.
Yeah, I want to give another technique and tactic, because what you're going to find out from your listeners and viewers is, they like insight. You appreciate my wisdom more than your listeners and viewers do. They just want, give us something we can use. So one of my books after Just Listen was called Talking to Crazy. And it's not about mental illness. I took a lot of heat from the psychology and the psychiatry profession. I said, did you ever read the book? What it is how do you deal with the people who drive you crazy? So it's really how to deal with yourself when other people provoke you. And in the book, so I like to come up with little techniques and tactics. And so there's something called the FUD-CRUD tactic. And CRUD is just something so you can remember it. So when you're in a conflict with someone, and you'll be calm because you're now going to have a tactic. You'll have something to do that's better than you usually do. So you're in an argument with someone, and if you're listening in and you're in customer service, this is a slam dunk. They're yelling at you, they're venting, they're blah, 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 blah. And then if you're in customer service and they're yelling at you, when they pause, you say a little bit more because I don't think you're finished. What? And then they say more. And then what's going to happen is they're going to finish. And here's the FUD part of the FUD-CRUD. You wait a few seconds, as opposed to just jumping back at them. And you say, you sound really frustrated and I think you're holding back. They're going to go, what? Yeah, you sound frustrated and I think you're really holding back because I think you're upset and disappointed too. So fill me in on all those things. What are you most frustrated about? What are you most upset about? What are you most disappointed about? And what happens is when you can draw that out of them, when the time you get to disappointment, they're calmer. Instead of being angry at you, they're saying, I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed in the company. I bought this thing. I don't know how to use it. It's a piece of junk. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I can understand why you're disappointed. Yeah. And if you're dealing with a personal relationship, they might say, I'm disappointed that here we are having the same argument we always have. Or I'm disappointed in you. But by the time they calm down, they might say, I'm disappointed in myself. Because it takes two to have a conflict, and I get all worked up and then I yell these things and I feel embarrassed afterwards. But if you can, if you can walk people through their frustration, their upset, and their disappointment, when you're talking about disappointment, and you can say this to someone in your personal life, you could say, I'm so glad I heard all this. Let's figure out a way so you never have to go through this again. Or we never have to go through this again. And by that time, when they're disappointed, can you see how they're calmer?
Yeah. It's so amazing how getting them to make you aware of their emotional state and to know that you get it, they become so much calmer. It's, you can almost see the lights of the amygdala just kind of going back to a calm, cool blue-green,
Well, what's really happening, Alex, is you're helping them to be aware of it, because as Matt Lieberman at UCLA, who wrote The Social Brain, I think, says that when people can accurately attach the real emotion to their feelings, it lowers amygdala activation by 1/3. So that when someone is feeling frustrated, and by the way, that's why you don't say, you sound angry, because that sounds insulting. I'm not angry. So that just provokes them. That's why you use upset instead of angry. But when you enable them to try those words on, you're really lowering the amygdala activation. The hijack settles down, the blood flow goes to their prefrontal cortex, and you're dealing with someone you can maybe have a constructive conversation with.
Yes, I love it. I'm curious, before we run out of any time, I'm not sure how long you have. I've got all the time in the world for you, of course. Before we started the recording, you mentioned that there's been some emotions going on, maybe having to do with sort of depressing emotions that kind of come back sometimes. Any that or anything else lately going on for you that you might be experiencing, any kind of chronic emotions that sort of come on repeat that you'd feel comfortable sharing about?
Well, something that I shared with you is I've been if you do a Google search for me, I've written over 1,300 blogs and articles, from Harvard Business Review to Psychology Today to Business Insider to Huffington Post to Thrive Global, Newsweek, and because I'm a serial ideator. But I don't build courses. I don't leverage them. I just seem to be able to, I try to make sense of the world in a way that people can feel the words. And I think what's depressed me is what we talked about is I felt like I was spinning my wheels because I didn't get traction. And I don't chase after people, by the way.
Right.
I've written or co-written 9 books. I've created 0 courses, which is where people make money. But it's not I'm not an instructional design person. There have been people who have made courses on my books. And I've reached out to them and I say, these are great slides. You did a great job with my book. Can I get the slides? And they say, I'll sell them to you. And I say, no, just spread the word. And so, but what I shared with you is that I'm starting to get traction, meaning I'm starting to attract people to create projects that we think can change the world. So something I'll add a plug to is a good friend of mine we became good friends because his 14-year-old son died by suicide 5 years ago. He left a suicide note saying, "Tell my story." And Jason Reed put over $200,000 into a documentary that's on Amazon Prime, "Tell My Story." And it's heart-wrenching. And he just talks to families, people who've been sad, experts, treatment programs. And I was one of the experts, so that's how we met. And then what he realized is what was most riveting about it, the only thing that was riveting, was when teenagers talked about when they were feeling low and they couldn't tell anyone. So he's created this documentary called "What I Wish My Parents Knew," because it's what he wished he'd known with his own son, but he was too late. He interviews, I think, 9 or 10 teenagers simply about, "Tell me about your low point." And they are mesmerizing. And we're showing it to high schools, to parents, because I've been looking for 25 years for something that would cause parents to talk differently with teenagers. And this is it.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an insight. This is what we give the parents who come and watch this. What I share with parents, and if you're listening or viewing this, you might want to write down these 5 words. And the words are complain, blame, excuses, threats, moodiness. Complain, blame, excuses, threats, moodiness. Because when teenagers are that way, and most of them are because of everything they're going through, they trigger their parents to react. And a reactive parent doesn't feel like they're capable of empathy to the teenager. So the teenager doesn't open up to the parent. And what the parent doesn't know is that the teenager is provoking the parent to be reactive. And when you watch these teenagers just talking about, in a very vulnerable, calm, and wonderful way, their low points, they're not complaining, blaming, making excuses, threatening, or they're not being moody. And so that's why they're mesmerizing to parents. And then parents go home after watching this, and they're not being transactional. They're not saying, "Where's your homework?" They're crying, and their kids are saying, "Mom, Dad, what's the matter?" And their parents are saying, "I just realized how much I love you." So I'm so excited over this, because you need to open people up to being empathic, and reactive people are unable to be empathic. And the whole world is running on overdrive with its reactivity. So
that really gave me chills again. And just imagining, how many teenage suicides are being and going to be prevented by this. That's why we're in this. This is what we're doing. So that's amazing. I wanted to zoom in on this emotion, though, this frustration, because you described how you've had these wonderful ideas, and obviously, you can make a fortune off of every single one. But something you said at the beginning before we started recording is a good idea without a team is no idea, or as good as no idea.
That's right.
And I really love the wisdom in that. I've been telling people that my superpower is asking for help, as I've realized how much help I need to get anything done at all with all of these projects going on. However, I wanted to really laser in on the emotion. So when you were, because out of that negative emotion, unpleasant emotion, I don't know if it was frustration, I don't know if it was anger, I don't know if it was disappointment, but out of that came this amazing project that is saving lives. So can you tell us about those dark, negative emotions and the wisdom they gave you to help you along into this?
Well, the dark, negative emotions is, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a provider. And almost all of those ideas I never monetized. And so the part of me, the shame I was feeling is, why don't I focus on money? But what I realize is that I'm an ideator, and it takes someone else to run with the ideas. And what would happen is when I would share them, there's a term, barriers to entry. So I have a pretty good track record with suicide prevention. What would happen is researchers in depression and suicide would send me their kids. And I'd say, can I share kind of what we do? And they said, if it's not evidence-based and you don't have a control group, we can't look at it. Oh, you could write up a proposal. Well, I don't know about proposals either. And then I said, well, you do all this research. Why don't you send your kid to your institution? And they'd say, we don't have your track record. And I'm worried about my kid. And so then I'd say, send me your kid. And so, and what I realized is something called barriers to entry. And so when I've tried to share this, so for instance, I have an approach to greatly reducing veteran suicide. But every time I approach any institutions, the feedback is, we don't need any other approaches. We have all these programs. We're selling our programs because we have to finance them. And we don't want any new programs, especially if you haven't done the proper research. But you're really connected, Maaahk. Can you get us funding? But what's happened, and I wouldn't say this about myself, but I'm running into people who say, you're like a coffee machine. You drip wisdom. They say, nice. I don't see that. But what I'm discovering is that higher level people who want to create something and they see that what they have isn't working, and they're dedicated not so much to selling their products, but to solving a problem, they're the ones who are being attracted to me because they're attracted to the wisdom. Here's a little saying. Brightness is turning nothing into something. Smartness is turning something into everything and selling the heck out of it. Wisdom is knowing what's important in life and trying to live your life accordingly. So I am not smart. Maybe I'm bright, maybe I'm wise, I don't know, but I'm not smart. But at this stage of my life, I don't care. And people, as I said, the person, Jason, who created this amazing documentary, which is not going to be available on Netflix or YouTube, because he made me an executive producer, and I said, I want to protect these kids. I said, you don't get it, Jason, but there are haters out there. You put this up on Netflix or YouTube, the haters are going to find these kids and attack their vulnerability. They're going to rip them apart. They're going to say, you're such a loser. And I told them, I can't allow that to happen. So that's why we're showing it in private screenings for corporations who care about their employees and executives who are parents and who are worried about their kids at high schools. And then I have another project with a colonel. I love these guys. A guy who's a retired colonel from the Army, Colonel Chris Kalenda. He has something called the Strategic Leaders Academy. It's all retired military majors and above, and they do great things to help leadership everywhere in the world. And we've just bonded because I'll tell you, if you're in the military, you want to get anything done, you give it to a colonel. Colonels are the people that get things done. Generals don't get anything done. They come up with an idea, strategy, then they delegate it to the colonels. And so, so he and I have developed this program for creating psychological safety in the world. And it's crazy good. In fact, we'll probably be mobilizing it, in the next month or two. And I gave him a tagline because I'm good for taglines because, we're going to run it through Strategic Leaders Academy. So, this tagline can change just like my, hurt less. But a tagline I gave him was, because these are military people, from making the world safe for democracy to making the workplace safe for everyone. That's chills, nice. Alex. That's a chill there.
So where can people find out everything you're up to? I know you're on LinkedIn. If they do want to learn more about What I Wish My Parents Knew and all of the other stuff you're up to, is there a hub people can go to?
Well, they'll have to, if you go to tellmystory.org. So he created a website, tellmystory.org. He has a 501c3, Choose Life. He didn't realize it was the anti-abortion thing. But if you go to tellmystory.org, you can find out about this video, the Tell My Story videos, and how to contact us. And so please do that. Please do that. I can't urge you enough. You can find me on LinkedIn. I have a podcast, My Wake Up Call. Wake up is one word. There'll be a show on UK Health Radio, Hurt Less, with JJ and Dr. Maaahk. Also something that is an idea that we're trying to leverage on LinkedIn is 90-second mentor. And what it is every Wednesday, we drop a minute and a half nugget of wisdom from guests from my podcast or one of my co-founders' podcasts. And it's just a short video that we're hoping will be an oasis in the middle of LinkedIn, because when you watch it, you say, wow, I'd like to think about that. And we have guests like Nolan Bushnell, who founded Atari and Chuck E. Cheese, Susan Cain, who wrote Quiet and Bittersweet, Daniel Pink, who's a best-selling author, Daniel Goleman, the inventor of emotional intelligence. So we have some leading thought leaders dropping these nuggets of wisdom. And when you go there, here's the idea. And here's what you can help me with, is we're going to push for companies and organizations to have Wednesday culture. So every Wednesday we drop one of these nuggets. And what we're suggesting is that organizations, companies, that every Wednesday, and they can go find the old nuggets, is that they watch the video and then you sit down with your people and say, how does that land for you? What do you think about that? Anybody like that? How could you put it into action in your life? Wow, that's cool. So, because we think there's too much yada, yada, yada on LinkedIn. And so we want to give people an oasis.
I love it. I'm going to check out the 90-second mentor myself. It sounds like a wealth of information. Dr. Maaahk Goulston, a coffee maker just dripping wisdom. Every drip is priceless. Take these ideas and run with them. Is there anything else that you would want the listeners to know before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I collect quotes. And I have a bunch myself that aren't half bad. My favorite quote of all time, and this could be more powerful than everything we've spoken about. It comes from a friend of mine, Dr. Shani Duperon, and she has a organization called Project Forgive that she co-founded with Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and it was nominated for a Nobel Prize. And The quote from Dr. Shawnee is, "Forgiveness is accepting the apology you will never receive." Forgiveness is accepting the apology you will never receive. And I'll tell you, when she told me that, my head nearly fell off, and I realized that my father, who died in 95, could be kind of critical, but he was hardworking, but he could say some pretty critical things that could really hurt your feelings, make you angry. And I'll just end with this because I think it's profound for me. So one of the things that he might say is, what makes you think you know anything about anything? Because my father was not a creative. He was an accountant. He worked hard. And I think creative stuff made him nervous because his boss was one of these larger than life people spouting stuff. And my father was very good with numbers. And so as soon as she told me that, I was driving in a car. And here's the apology that my father never gave me that I think he would give me, that I accepted. And the apology was, "Mark, remember when I used to say, what makes you think you know anything about anything?" I was talking about myself. Because when you come up with these kind of crazy ideas, they made me nervous because I'm good with numbers. And there's a lot of things I wasn't that good with.
Yeah.
Connecting with you, your brothers, your mom. I was a hard worker. And what you've done with your life, what you've accomplished, the lives you've touched, the lives you've saved, I don't deserve you as my son. And I'm sorry. And I'm sharing this because you can see the emotion in me. And when I imagine him saying that to me, which he would, here's the other side I didn't realize. I realized I owed him an apology. And in my mind's eye, I said, I owe you an apology for having a chip on my shoulder, for holding a grudge about that. And I should have known better. I mean, I'm a shrink. And you worked hard. You were critical, but, you didn't beat anyone. You didn't drink. You were just, a little rough. And I'm sorry for holding hard feelings against you. And then I said, and because of this conversation, I'm able to say 6 words that I hadn't been able to say. I love you. I miss you. That's a warm chill, Alex.
Yes, a warm chill. This has been amazing. Thank you so much. I'd love to have you back on again at some point, and we will make sure to put the links into the description for everybody. Thanks so much for being on today.
Thank you, Alex, and I look forward to our staying in touch because Alex is one of the good people in the world. He's new to this. Obviously, I'm a little more relaxed because I've done a lot of these things. He's one of those people in the world who's up to all good. We need people like Alex because we're all waging a war against the people who are up to no good. So if you're listening in and you're viewing, you support Alex. That's an order.
Thank you, Mark. Hey guys, thanks for watching. This is Dr. Alex Wills with Give a F Actually. Make sure to check us out on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you get your podcasts.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to check out the merch store. RadicalEmotionalAcceptance.com. Bye.
Bye.